Some incredible figures when you see where we started and where we are right now. So as I mentioned, December last year, we started with this rollout, mostly in the UK and Western Europe. The middle of February, we had about 43 million doses in 1 week. Take a look at that, though, Clement. The 27th of June, right up to 327 million. That, by the way, is the record so far. The latest figure that we have for you is around about 260 million, Clement. But what's important about that number in February, the reason I brought it up, was that's roughly the amount of jabs that we need here in South Africa to get population immunity, around about 40 million. The rest of the world was able to distribute those jabs in the space of a single week. And remember, our vaccine rollout only started on the 17th of February. So before we even started, 43 million jabs had been administered in a single week. And speaking of that vaccine inequality, let's bring up our map, Clement. Wherever you see a dark blue country, Clement, that's a country which is going to have widespread coverage of the vaccine by the end of this year. Lighter colors, we're looking at mid-2022. Orange, late next year. And red, Clement, that's where you're going to have real problems. We're looking at 2023, possibly even later. And take a look at that. Most of those red countries are, in fact, in sub-Saharan Africa. South Africa, perhaps luckily, is a blue country. So mid-2022, we should have widespread coverage in terms of the vaccine. But really, Clement, when you look at this map, it's clear that the bigger economies, the likes of the European states, China, North America, those are the ones which are covered, almost moving on from the COVID crisis. The rest of us picking up the scraps, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and these delays are costing money, right?
Yeah.
What kind of numbers are we looking at?
Well, the Economist's Intelligence Unit actually put this together, Clement, looking at the question of if these countries don't have widespread coverage by the middle of next year, what does it mean for their GDP? Let's bring up our calculator. This is going to shock you, Clement. So in other words, what does it mean for the GDP of these countries over the next, say, 2 or 3 years? The figure that they came up with, incredibly, $2.3 trillion. You can see it right there. Take a look at all those zeros. $2.3 trillion, that's roughly 35 trillion rand. And it's not a once-off situation, Clement. As I mentioned, we'll be dealing with this crisis for years to come. Let's actually look at the breakdown in terms of the different years, just as we wrap it up, Clement. 2022, we're talking around about 300 billion in losses, 300 billion in GDP losses that we would have had if we had an equitable vaccine rollout. Of course, we're talking about countries which didn't get the jab in an extensive way. The following year, Clement, about $550 billion. 2024, about $700 billion. And 2025, just to cap it off, another $700 billion, all adding up to $2.3 trillion. Those are the stats, Clement. So, you know, if we thought that we could brush the COVID crisis aside after a year or two, we may have to think twice. That's the reality for emerging markets and countries which don't have their hands on those vaccines.